What's up, Buttercup? Welcome back to my channel. Today's video is all about answering your burning questions about my books. So I have notes because I've gotten a lot of questions this year about my books, and many of them have been similar or the same questions. So to wrap up 2024, I've written them down and of course, answering them for y'all. Now, the first question, and one that I get the most, where should I start with your books? And this is not going to be a great answer, but it's the best answer, I think, if that makes sense. I think it will make sense. Okay, so that really depends on what genres you like and dislike. Don't read my books if you aren't a fan of poetry, fantasy, women's historical fiction, because that's what I write. And no, I definitely will not, never ever, will be offended if you tell me you aren't a fan of any or all of those genres, because, you know, there's 8 billion people in the world and every one of them is an individual. You are an individual. If you don't like any of the genres that I write, it's okay. It's totally okay. I've had this happen since I started publishing, and some people have told me, oh, you write that, that's great, I'll pick it up. And like I can tell like from their voice and their facial features that like that's not what they're interested in. And I always say, it's okay. You don't have to read any of my books. Like, if you go onto the sales page of Nicole Brona or Nicole Pierman and you read the summaries and you see the title and the cover and you read a sample and like it's not vibing with you, it's not vibing with you. You're not going to offend me. It's okay. It's actually better if you don't force yourself through something that you don't like, and that's everything in general. Sometimes there are caveats, like, you know, you gotta pay bills and you have to, you know, do certain things at work that you think are boring or whatever, but that's not relevant. If you're reading for fun and you don't like any of those genres that I write, you don't have to read anything of mine. It's totally okay. I know there are, unfortunately, a lot of writers that think that you should. I don't know where they're coming from. I don't know what else to say on that other than like that's really weird. So that's where I stand. I'm not one of those writers that will get offended or hurt or whatever if you say that you're not interested in the genre or multiple genres that I write. It's totally fine. And also keep in mind, my books are targeted towards younger women. When you market anything, including art, even though I know that hurts a lot of people's souls, but it is what it is, okay? When you market something, including art, including specifically books, there is a target audience. Yes, with 8 billion people in the world, there's a lot of potential. However, you can't get even half of those. I would even say, and I'm not trying to be mean, but for writers, there is a limited amount of readers in the world, and then you have to narrow it down more and more and more. And so I think it is good to be reminded that yes, you might be interested in a couple of my books or my poetry books, but then when you get into it, it might not be for you, and that's totally fine, like I said. But it's marketed specifically to readers within a demographic and an age range, because that's just me and how I write, and that's where my super fans are. That was a lot, but I just wanted to be honest with that question, because without knowing you personally, it's kind of hard to answer that question. And even if I know you personally, it's still hard at times. And I have told people up front, you don't read any of the genres. I don't think any of my books are gonna interest you, so you should just pass. Like, unless you really want to, but then again, like, you read hard science fiction 90% of the time, and the other 10% is nonfiction. So there's no overlap here. I think you're gonna be disappointed. So just skip on over. It's totally fine. That's happened a couple of times, and I've gotten shocked but happy reactions. I don't know what's going on in the internet world with writers and readers, but I guess that's abnormal. I'm so sorry, but I wanted to make that as the first question so you all know it's okay if you are not interested in my books. You can continue to watch me do a bunch of book reviews and tags and wrap-ups and TBRs and all that stuff. You can buy my merch, or you can suggest me and my novels to other people that are more in line with the genres that I write. So it's not just, oh, I have to buy a book or two or all of these books to support Nicole, but like I kind of am not 100% into it, but I want to try. Like, there are different ways, not just having to buy books from me. Number 2, what inspired A Patriot's Tale? That's the first book that I've ever written. It's been through 7 drafts. Okay. And I actually, when I was on Wattpad and a Wattpad star, this was almost 5 years ago. Oh my God. Okay. Wow, time flies. But when I was on Wattpad, when I was a Wattpad star, A Patriot's Tale actually won the 2019-2020 historical fiction Waddy out of, I don't know, like thousands of historical fiction books. So that was a very nice surprise. I am not on Wattpad and haven't been for a very, very long time. But yes, even a book that you started when you were young, through lots and lots and lots of revisions, it can still be a great book, great enough to want to win an award, right? Out of thousands upon thousands of books. We love to see it. But what inspired me? Okay, this is funny. Maybe it's not funny. I wanted to write about a female spy during the American Revolutionary War after I watched Mel Gibson's movie when I was a kid. And I just want to say, because I keep seeing this year, I don't know what's happened, but yes, there were female spies throughout many wars, many countries. And yes, there were even a few women who dressed up as men to be soldiers. It's not impossible. It is historically accurate. It's just extremely rare. And that's why I say that A Patriot's Tale is women's historical fiction, because that is a standard trope within that subgenres. Readers want to have a female main character no matter the time period, but they really want a female main character that is a 1 in a million type of thing. So another example of this would be Grace O'Malley, who was a pirate queen of Ireland, and she, like her title says, she's a pirate, and she was technically a chieftain, but you could say queen, of her O'Malley clan within Ireland. That is very rare. It happened. Grace O'Malley is real. And so that would be a 1 in a million type of woman that would be then the center of attention of a women's historical fiction novel. Lily is not real. However, there are many instances of women being spies for the Continental Army and for the British Army, honestly, during the American Revolutionary War. And there were a couple of women who also dressed up as men to fight in the war for their own various reasons. So keep that in mind. Yes, it did happen. And is a very popular trope for women's historical fiction. If you don't like that type of trope where it's focusing on a 1 in a million type of woman that does not fit in her society, then don't read A Patriot's Tale. Okay. I have had feedback that it's not realistic. It's realistic. It's just 1 in a million type of situations. Number 3, What's a book you think more people should read that you wrote? This is a nice one. I wish more people read The Two Foxes more, though it was, in a way, a hard book to publish for many reasons. I think that is probably one of the reasons why not that many people have read it. I had a cover artist that was very ill, so I had to push off the publishing date a few times because you need a cover. Okay, you do. And then I had to rewrite the second half of The Two Foxes because there were just some plot issues and it didn't make sense. Shout out to Sarah, my editor, for pointing them out and being honest. I decided with her to rewrite the second half, and the book is better for it. But that meant I had to once again push back the publishing date. Luckily, I didn't have pre-order, but I had to keep moving it further and further into 2022 and then 2023. No, I don't even remember the dates because it moved so much. But it was during the height of COVID. That also did not help. I had, unfortunately, though they're all okay, but I had, unfortunately, a lot of advanced readers that became ill, and they were halfway or they didn't even get through the book, but they had to stop. And so my advanced reader team went down to like 3 or 4 people when it was 15-ish. That's very significant. You can't do anything when people are sick. This is during lockdown. This is COVID. Like, there are things that you just can't control. I could not control that, and I completely understood. Please don't read a book and write a review on Goodreads and Amazon when you have COVID, or like your mom is sick with COVID and you have to take care of, like, that is not a priority, right? But all that stuff combined just really affected that book's release. And I think you can really tell that. Also, I think Amazon was doing some weird stuff with the review accepting on Amazon. Because if you look on Goodreads, The Two Foxes has about 20 to 25 reviews. I don't remember. But then on Amazon, the reviews are only 8. So also, I can't prove this, but also there were just issues with Amazon not letting with the reviews and the ratings. Well, actually, I can prove there was one person that was trying really hard to put up their rating and review, but Amazon kept rejecting it. I don't know. Like, and this was a week after I published, and then I just said, you can put it on Goodreads, it's fine. Like, this is not worth your effort. Amazon is being Amazon, apparently. So there's just a lot going on with The Two Foxes, and it's a shame because I think the story is really, really solid. The cover is lovely, and the characters are great, and just all the great things, but yeah, that wasn't a good launch, and it wasn't a good year after. And that is what it is. You can write the best book, y'all. You can really write the best book and do everything right with marketing and publishing, and it doesn't move, or it hardly moves the needle, and you can't figure out why. At least I have ideas, and I don't even think they're ideas. I think they're pretty solid in the many reasons why there was upset and it didn't work as well as my other book launches. But you can really only do so much, and it sucks, it does, but it is what it is. A lot of things were happening during that time frame, so it is there. I hope you pick it up if you're interested in the summary, or you do a read sample on Amazon and you're really intrigued. Love to see it. I hope it gets a little bump. Sarah and Red Fox need a little love. Number 4, do you have any self-inserts in your books? In some ways, yes. My main characters all have some type of mental illnesses. And then in my urban fantasy series, Tessa loves coffee and pizza and is very sarcastic, but that's about it. Number 5, what's your most niche book? This is a good one. This is a good one. I'm gonna go with Danu's Curse. That book is very, very niche. It's Irish historical fantasy, and I based the story and characters off the idea of what if all this was real? And you kind of see that in a lot of other Irish fantasy or Irish historical fantasy novelists like Morgan Llewellyn. I was actually inspired by Morgan Llewellyn to write Danu's Curse because she does this a lot in her books, not all of the books, but the ones that have magic and stuff in them. So you're basically going off the idea of these gods and goddesses and these fae folk are real, and then the history is also real. I mean, like high historical fantasy. So you have to keep in mind that it's the Iron Age of Ireland, thousands of years ago. There are very tricky deities or just outright nasty deities with morals that are different from us, and that also goes for humans as well. It is a fantasy. It is also historical. There are going to be morals that are not, absolutely not the same, even with the humans, but especially with the deities and the fair folk, that would not fly in the 20th century, but even like especially in the 21st century. And I think that messes people up, because I have had people say that they love Ness, for example, but then they hate her at the same time. And it's like, yes, I can definitely understand why, but that's what's normal for Iron Age of Ireland. They don't have the same morals, they don't think the same as us, and you hear constantly, oh, why is this main character or these side characters or this story so modern? I don't like that. And so when, honestly, when a writer does that, you're gonna have morals that are not gonna align with yours, and maybe you're not going to understand them, but if we're talking about historically, that's how it worked. And it's also based on Irish myths, lore, and legends, so some of that stuff can be very upsetting or just really weird. But after a certain point, to me personally, y'all know about the incest and violence and horrendous acts of all the things with Roman and Greek and other ancient societies with their lore and mythology and legends, and you can accept that for the most part. So it's the same vibe, but Ireland. And I don't think it's any worse than the other cultures, like Roman and Greek myths and legends. They have a lot of incest. Oh my god, they have a lot. Like, yeah, I don't have that in my book. Holy shit, that's something I said. But yes, this is just me harping back to the whole, we're totally different for a good many reasons. We're totally different in the 21st century in what we accept, but back in the day, that's there. Okay, that's there. And also realizing that just because there's myths and legends that have that doesn't mean that the Romans or the Greeks or the Celts did that all the time. But it was acceptable in some form or another. So there's just a lot of nuance. And I want you to think deeply. I mean, you don't have to, but I want you to think deeply when you read about Danu's Curse, to see about the different morals and ethics and just overall the story and how it's different than what we would deal with in the 20th or the 21st century, or even the 19th or the 18th century. So it is a thought experiment in a way, and that's why it's also very niche, and it's not completely to market because it does not have a happy ending. It has a bittersweet-ish ending, and usually historical fantasy has a happy ending, but this one doesn't. So yeah, very niche. That can be a hard sell. However, I love Danu's Curse. I love my characters with all their issues and more. I really, really love that novel. And I think you'll be totally fine if you know about the Irish myths and legends and lore, and you understand that the morals are different than in the 20th and 21st century, and just be prepared for that. Number 6, what poetry book do I start with if I'm new to poetry? And I honestly cannot say, because my poetry is, as they say, not to market. The trend for almost a decade at this point is what you call Instagram poetry, and I don't write that, and my book covers are not at all to trend, and they're not going to be to trend because I don't like that trend. Pretty simple, right? You could try out my alliteration poetry chat book, Alpha Beta Poetry. It's less than 40 pages. All of the poems start with the same letter of the alphabet, and yes, they do all make sense. If you pull out a dictionary or even like a thesaurus and you look at every single word in that poem, it does tell a story. It does make sense. They're not just words all put together. It tells a story. Because I've also had people say that it doesn't make sense. It does make sense. You just have to put effort into it. The most, I guess, to market would be Teal Nostalgia. However, 80% of those poems were written when I was in trauma therapy, so it's very, very heavy. Keep that in mind. Textual Love, I tried to market it as nonfiction, but people kept thinking it was poetry. And look, you can try all you want. Like, I tried for a full year, and it was just not working. So then, and it was on Wattpad actually, so this is probably good. Because who knows what would have happened if it started on Amazon and I was trying to make it something that it wasn't. When it was on Wattpad for a full year, people were thinking that it was poetry, even though I said in the blurb and in the introduction and all that stuff that it was real life text messages sent to me from my now husband. And so like they weren't getting it. So then I created a story around the text messages and made them sound prettier, some of them, not all of them actually. Still, 80% of those text messages in Textual Love were directly from my now husband. The other 20%, I created a story, and it's not even a fake story, because these text messages were sent when we were in a long distance relationship. And it has a beginning, middle, and end, and it does end happily ever after. So just keep that in mind. They are, legit text messages. So they're not full out poems or anything like that. They're 1 to 2 sentences. And then Paradise Found, back in the day of Tumblr, there used to be a trend where it was 1 sentence poems. Then it was rebranded as brevity poetry. Same thing though, 1 sentence poems. And it was really popular for a while, and I like churned out a bunch of them in college, and that was the starting point of writing out my trauma. So some of them are based on trauma therapy, some of them are just whatever, But at that point, I couldn't write full out poems about my trauma, so I just did one-liner or brevity poetry, and that actually was really helpful. And then I, compiled a bunch of longer poems, and it was really great, and it was really helpful. Paradise Found is the longer, so to speak, of the chat books, and they are one-liner poems. So don't go in expecting full-length poems. It's just brevity. It's all brevity. Number 7, what inspired Obsidian Murders? I've said this a few times, but just to get it into one video. I grew up neo-pagan, so all of the world-building stuff I used to believe, and I still have family members and family friends and all that stuff that still believe basically most or all the things that are in Obsidian Murders and the subsequent books. And basically, I'm just gonna go with that for the rest of my time writing urban fantasy, because if it's not broken, don't fix it. I do, however, pick the lore, legends, myths, etc. that I do want to work on or maybe tweak ever so slightly, or I just take it and I don't change anything whatsoever regarding the magical beings and how the other world works and Tessa's belief systems, and this particular Wiccan coven believes this stuff, because like they all don't believe the exact same thing. They're all going to be different, right? So there are things that I pick and choose, but for the most part, in general, on average, neo-pagans and Wiccans would understand and they would believe the stuff in Obsidian Murders. So really, I just created the real world as seen by a certain segment of the population, and then I just threw in, oh, they're solving magical murders. And then I built up Tessa, Bloodsworth, Drusille, the house fairy, George, the ghost that lives in Tessa's apartment, and, you know, everything else. The final question, this is a good one, number 8. Why did you spell out the term otherworld differently in Danu's Curse compared to the books in your urban fantasy series? I did that intentionally. They are completely different concepts. Shout out to this reader. They did want to stay anonymous, but I love this question. The otherworld, one word, for Danu's Curse is based on Celtic mythology, legend, and lore, and it is very unique to the Celts. With the urban fantasy books, I do not follow 100% Celtic beliefs, lore, and legend, because that's more of a mesh of neo-paganism across many different pagan religions, not just Celtic paganism. So that's why I write them out differently in Danu's Curse. Otherworld is one word. In the urban fantasy series that I'm currently writing, and just like all the other urban fantasy books in that world that I'm not changing because it's all there, but I digress. But in the urban fantasy books, it is otherworld. It's 2 separate words. And there are definitely similarities in the other world for the urban fantasy that I took from Celtic mythology, but it's just too different because I'm mixing and mashing a lot of different pagan beliefs into the urban fantasy for it to make sense. So you will see similarities, but that's the extent of it. Thank you so much, everyone, for asking any and all questions about my books. I really do appreciate it. If you're interested in any of these books, my links are in the description box below and also pinned as a comment. Thank you so much again, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.